bring in Alan Horton on the D&M Leasing Hotline here on Shan and RJ. Good morning, Alan. How you doing?
Sean and RJ, I am great. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for joining us. Barkley asked Anthony Edwards what there is to do for him in Minnesota or where to eat. What would you tell Chuck?
I don't know if I have any recommendations for Chuck. I think it is going to be a shock for those guys to be coming to Minnesota. It's not a place like they admitted that Chuck's said he hasn't been to in 20 years. So, it's a new era. It's a new time, and the Timberwolves are excited to host the TNT crew. Can't wait for Draymond Green to get here to be a part of that and his hatred for Rudy Gobert. So it'll make things spicy, I think.
Alan, be honest. Be honest. After Denver ran off 3 straight, did you think the series was over?
Yeah, I went through a variety of emotions in that series. I would say I thought the Wolves were going to sweep the Nuggets after 2 games, the way they had played, the way they dominated, the winning twice at Ball Arena. And then, yes, after 3 straight Jokic-led performance, I thought it was pretty much over for the Wolves. But winning those last 2 games, to win Game 6 and 7 and then to have Game 7, you come back and from 20 down with 22 minutes to play, unbelievable way to finish off a Game 7, greatest comeback in Game 7 history. And this team, the one thing my partner Jim Peterson and I said on the Game 6 broadcast, we just couldn't see the Wolves going out in 4 straight. This team was too good during the regular season. It's got too much chemistry. They've shown too much fight and too much heart to go out in 4 straight. That was one of the things I was hanging on to in Game 6. And I thought they played marvelously the last 2 games.
Alan, we had the benefit of being able to sit back knowing we were in the West Finals and saying, who do you want? Who do we want to win between Denver and Minnesota? From a matchup standpoint, let's reverse the question. Better/worse matchup, wherever you want to take it, between the Mavericks and the Thunder for the Wolves?
I actually didn't have an opinion on that. I thought either way that I think create some challenges. I kind of wanted to play the Thunder. That was my point of view, simply because of sort of OKC's, 2 things, their lack of experience and their lack of size up front. You guys took advantage on the glass. They just don't have a lot of size, and I can't believe at the trade deadline they only acquired Gordon Hayward, and that didn't really address their rebounding issues.
Yeah.
They just basically have Chet and he's not at the size and strength. He'll be more dominant as the years go on the glass, but he needed help and he didn't have any. So I would have leaned more towards going against the Thunder, just knowing that Doncic and Irving can be so dynamic in the backcourt, and the Wolves have, like a lot of teams, have struggled when they've played, have struggled to kind of contain them.
What's Minnesota's weakness?
Well, I would say that their offense has not been their strength, right? They're a middle-of-the-pack offensive team, and so there can be times when it looks pretty ugly at the offensive end and not consistent. I think in games 3, 4, and 5 against Denver, you could point to that end of the floor and say that the Wolves needed to pick things up. But it's all intertwined, right? Like once your defense plays well, you start playing well offensively. Your defense can trigger your offense. They're all tied in together. And in 3, 4, and 5, both of those things really struggle. But I would point more towards the offensive end, the lack of consistency. I think this team has, when they're on offensively, they look good, but that just hasn't been a consistent basis throughout the whole season.
We're talking with Timberwolves play-by-play announcer Alan Horton here on Shan and RJ on 105 through the Fan. Alan, when there's been a lot of talk already about just how big the Wolves are and how big they play, obviously with Naz Reid and Cat and Gobert. And, we've had our own discussions here about how, that's going to be difficult for the Mavericks on the glass. And, they've got their 2 bigs that they've got in rotation, but they're missing Maxi Kleber right now. Where is that a detriment, though, for the Wolves? Where have you seen that, that big lineup burn them a little bit?
I think it's hurt them mostly in transition and being able to increase the pace a little bit. When you've got 2 7-footers on the floor basically at all times, it's tough to get going a little bit because those guys just naturally take a little more time to get down the floor. And, Chris Finch often talks about wanting to push the pace and take advantage of some transition opportunities, which you need to do. But that's tough when 2 of your 5 guys on the floor are still in the backcourt, haven't crossed midcourt yet, and the other 2 guys or 3 guys are up in the front court. So I would say it's hurt them a little bit in that department. But I tell you what, it's been you look back to last year with those same 3 guys, those combos never worked. The Cat Rudy combo was like a +0 net rating. The Rudy Nas minutes were a negative. The Cat Nas minutes were a negative. This year, it's completely flipped. They've figured out how to play together. All three combinations between Nas, Rudy, and Cat have been really positive net ratings, almost a +10 for each of them. And so it's really evolved into something pretty dynamic where the Wolves don't even really think about it anymore. It's not really two twin towers or 7-footers on the floor. It's now Cat, who's become comfortable in the power forward spot, and Rudy Gobert at that center spot, and Nas coming in whenever he's needed. And if Rudy and or Cat gets in foul trouble, he can easily come in and play 30 minutes a night.
Alan, has Cat been cool, or how has he adapted to like the Anthony Edwards takeover? It was supposed to be Cat, next franchise players, and Anthony Davis comparison is going to rule the league, and now we all look at it as Ant's team. How has Towns dealt with that?
They've dealt with it masterfully. I mean, and it stems from both those guys being good people, have great personalities, and understanding that they need help. Yes, there's no doubt when Ant came in as the number one pick, Karl Anthony Towns, still had that was his team. But Ant has risen, obviously, to a level where he's carrying the team on a nightly basis at the offensive end. And Cat has that's not easy to do, to become sort of second fiddle, if you will. But the Wolves have never tried to make him feel like he's a second fiddle. Like it's, I think we like to put these labels on, okay, who's the one on your team? Who's the two? Who's the three? And to a certain degree, you need to think about that stuff. But as far as the team goes, they've just acquired all this talent. I mean, Rudy is he's a defensive player of the year for the fourth time. So we don't even mention him in terms of Ant and Rudy. And Mike Conley is like, in terms of Ant and Cat. And you mentioned Rudy and Mike Conley, and then you got a young and up-and-coming sort of jack of all trades and Jaden McDaniels, who can have big offensive games, who's a stellar defensive player. So they kind of look at it more like just acquiring all this talent and putting it all together. But there's no doubt that Ant is number one and Cat is number two, and it's been a seamless transition. And all you have to do is look at some of their post-game press conferences when those two, Cat and Ant, are on the podium together, like they were after Game 7, and they're hilarious together. And that's genuine. And when you have that kind of feelings for one another, I think it translates to how you play on the floor.
Alan, when you take a look at how the Timberwolves, which we all know how great they are defensively, and there's been a lot of talk about that, but how would you expect them matchup-wise to approach the obvious question of Luka and Kyrie? The Thunder went with a lot of double teams that opened up opportunities for P.J. Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. in the last series. But how would you expect the Timberwolves to approach those two in terms of matchups?
Yeah, it was interesting going back to the Denver series is how they matched up against Jokic and Murray and the different things they did against Jokic specifically. That at first they didn't want to double him and let everybody else get loose, but Jokic was still able to get loose, and he was able to get everybody going at the same time, which was his masterful Game 5, I believe it was, where he had 40 points, 13 assists, and 0 turnovers. Then the Wolves went more toward doubling in the last two games and making sure Jokic didn't beat him and nobody else could knock down a shot. So, that's the big issue when you get this deep in the playoffs. You've got to pick your poison. Are you going to just match up with Luka and Kyrie with the combination of Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, and then Nickeil Alexander-Walker coming off the bench? Are you going to try? It's different in doubling a big versus some wing players in Luka and Kyrie. That becomes a little more of an issue. And those guys' passing is so elite, especially Luka. I mean, he'll pick you apart. And if you just kind of softly run a double at him, he'll find the open man. And the way P.J. Washington is shooting it right now, that creates a big problem that you can't afford to leave him and some other guys. If you put good shooting around those two, it's really a conundrum. I think you're going to see a lot of different things in this series, adjustments, readjustments, and then adjusting again. So I think we're going to see a lot of different defenses in trying to slow down Luka and Kyrie.
You have called NBA games for a very long time, been around the league for a long time. When you take a look and think back over your time watching NBA basketball, how good within the context of the last 20 or so years is this Timberwolves defense, and what is it that makes them so good? Is it just personnel?
It's personnel and sort of the attitude that they play with. Elston Turner is a longtime coach in this league, and he's sort of the defensive coordinator. and they've got them playing a really high level. I mean, last year when things weren't quite clicking, and the Wolves still made the play-in, they made the first round, lost to Denver. Their defense was 10th, but it didn't really feel like a top 10 defense. It wasn't quite dominant. I think when you look at the top 10 defenses in the NBA in the regular season, I'm not sure top 10 means what it used to mean. I think the 7, 8, 9, 10 defenses probably aren't that great. I think the top 5 is really what the elite group is. They've been able to take the next step this year by adjusting what they've done with Rudy. Rudy's been more comfortable second year around. He's trusting his teammates. His teammates are trusting him. They don't just funnel everything to Rudy, which they thought they could do last year, and Rudy would just clean up all the messes. That wasn't the case. And so it starts with Rudy, and then it continues out to the perimeter and the point of attack defense. They've really been stressing, stopping ball drives and getting pressure on ball handlers. And they've got just some dogs defensively in Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And Anthony Edwards has risen to the occasion. During the regular season, Ant would kind of have to, they wouldn't put him on the toughest matchup offensively simply because he carries such a big load offensively. But in the playoffs, I mean, he's been playing both ends at a really elite level. He just absolutely shut down Jamal Murray in this Denver series. And he switched to Jamal Murray, I think, probably in game 5, I think it was, maybe 4, maybe 5, and basically held him under 30% shooting in the series.
Alan,
he was the prime. Yeah.
Who is more disliked between Rudy Gobert and A-Rod?
Nationally?
What is it about Gobert that turns off Draymond, whatever others, and have you met A-Rod yet?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, A-Rod's around the team. We've had him on the broadcast before, and A-Rod's great. And, he's really jumped into he does a lot of the Fox baseball stuff. So he's really polished as a broadcaster. He really enjoys doing that. So he comes on and he loves getting on the microphone and doing that. It's a great question about Rudy Gobert and his how people feel about him across the league. It's amazing. Once you get Rudy Gobert on your team and you see him, you talk to him, you get to know him a little bit, and you're like, this guy's an unbelievable person. He's just a great personality. The way he approaches the game, the way he works on his body to prepare himself on a season-by-season basis, just you love everything about it. And then you see the way he's anchoring this defense, the way he's the defensive player of the year, not just blocking shots, he deters shots, the way he rotates, all the little nuances of the game you love. But you only realize that, I guess, when he's on your team. He's absolutely hated around the league. And I don't know exactly why. I don't know why players don't like him. I don't like there's he has some issues with some referees around the league, and certainly the fans are yelling things all the time during the regular season when we go around the league. It's really I don't know if it's the touching of the microphones or the whole COVID thing that they kind of blame him for that.
Yeah.
That seems a little ridiculous at this point. And I don't know what else you point to.
Alan, thank you so much for the time, man. We appreciate it. Hope to check in again. Have a great call this series.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks.